Hey, James, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me. So I'm from Israel. I'm 46 years old. I've been doing sales since I was 10 years old. Started off really seeing my grandmother sell silver antiques in London, and grew up and kind of after military service, went into the diamond industry. So been selling diamonds for the first decade of my career,
Yeah.
which is very, very exciting. And kind of evolved from there. 2007, I recognized the recession hitting, and diamonds are probably the first thing that someone will stop buying
Yeah.
when they
It's
don't
not a
have any money.
necessity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last thing they'll start buying when they did. So I walked away from that industry and actually walked into high tech and technology. And yeah, was in that industry for about 10 years. Really saw that evolve. I really started in with the AI. That started about 10 years ago. So I saw that kind of evolve and grow. I did a little bit of that, selling SaaS and technology, and kind of really worked my way up the ranks into a VP sales role. And then a few years ago, I decided I wanted to really connect to my entrepreneurial side, and decided to join the Founder Network and get into selling sales training.
Yeah. And I take it you lived in the UK. I
So
hint of,
long story. English mother, American dad, born in New York, but grew up in the Far East, and then moved to Israel. So
cool.
yeah.
So you've sold in the US, the UK, and in Israel?
Yeah, so I've sold everywhere. I mean, I've sold everything, pretty much anything to anyone, anywhere. So really focusing on if we're looking at tech, which is, these days that's really where we're focusing on. A little bit about me right now. I currently work with ambitious technology business leaders and sales professionals that want to scale their business rapidly, that are afraid of losing control, that are also fed up of, I'd say, processes and coaches and maybe managers and that go in there and rub their ego, make them feel all fluffy and special.
Yeah. Cool. And how was it the transition from, now, was it diamond wholesaling or diamond retailing?
Yeah, good question. So a little bit of both, I'd say. Mainly on, did a lot of export and wholesaling, and then kind of did some retailing as well. Not as much, but really kind of back in those days, it was pretty easy. You'd buy something and you'd sell it.
Yeah.
And today I usually when I work with my clients, I sometimes have to explain to them what the word prospecting comes from.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, it comes from diamonds and gold, and going out there and prospecting and going through the mud and finding those little diamonds, and then after you'd find them and have that difficult difficult process, actually go down to town and sell them, and that was the selling bit. So
Yeah.
if you think about it, it's really relevant to today's world, because we're out there prospecting for good potential clients, and those good potential clients are actually diamonds, and it's a rough job.
It is. And I think people are just starting to dig in any old hole instead of thinking about where the diamond's most likely going to be.
Yeah, and many times when I work with my clients that I get invited in, or sales professionals kind of reach out to me, it's usually because I think what we're finding today is some professionals within our space are really looking for people to tell them what they need to hear and not what they want to hear.
Right.
And I think the first thing is really, prospecting is a scavenger hunt. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And I think just following your show and what you do, those top SDRs and BDRs, these guys know what they're doing. It's a profession.
Right.
And
Because it's much more like detective work than it is just digging a hole. Right.
Absolutely. And you know what the funny thing is, and I ask this question a lot: what is the definition of great selling? And definition of great selling, from my point of view, is when your prospect realizes for himself what you have helped him discover.
Right.
And sometimes we have prospects in front of us that we're not aware they're super, super qualified, because we're just maybe not asking the right questions. And you said it, being a good detective and knowing how to uncover that.
That's it. And getting them, I think you made the right point, getting them to focus on a latent pain that they have been feeling but haven't recognized.
Hmm. Interesting point. And it's funny that you say that, because what I find is that what most people do in sales is they've got it the wrong way around. They're using logic to solve a problem that has an emotional root.
Yes.
No one buys technology or SaaS or anything for that matter, even jewelry, if you mentioned it, because it has cool features. It's the same as no one asks for, how can I say this without offending anybody, hemorrhoid cream because there's a special discount.
Right.
If you don't understand the emotional reasons for buying, then we're wasting the prospect's time and our time. And
Yes.
I think that is really the key of today. It's understanding the psychology of this, understanding that there's a strong emotional impact, and that is where we need to probe to. I think the best example I could give is, when you go on websites and it's demo today, click here, demo today, and everyone's rushing in there to give a demo.
Yeah.
Now that is the single biggest reason why their deals are taking so long to actually close and never happen. And why would you give a demo when the demo needs to go for the kill and rather than the chase? Does that make sense?
It does, because I think people are looking at the sale from their perspective instead of the client's perspective.
Exactly. Buyers buy for their own reasons, not our reasons.
They could care less about our pipeline, our quotas, our
Well, yeah.
process.
And it's funny because I always give this example of the ugly baby. I don't know if you've had anyone who walks up to you and says, "Listen, buddy, you have to see my baby, and let me show you pictures of my baby." And right away, they show us a picture or two of their baby, and what do we usually tell them? What do we want them to stop doing?
So no more pictures. So cute. That's
Exactly.
adorable.
It's such adorable baby, but we don't really care about that. About their toy or their baby. We care about our own issues, and
Yeah.
that is really the essence with professional selling today. And when we talk about competition, so I have a lot of people say, "Well, James, there's a lot of competition out there. We got to show them benefits and features. We got to show them why we're so special. We got to show them all this stuff." And the funny thing is that we don't realize that the competition isn't only our direct competition. It's anyone sitting in a chair trying to sell our prospect anything.
And doing nothing, which is the default,
Clearly,
right?
clearly. Well, people are terrified of change.
Yeah. And that's it,
They,
because there is friction when you buy something. There's friction and change,
absolutely.
you know?
And yeah, and it's so interesting because I'll have a lot of I work with so many different salespeople from so many different type of verticals. But if we're to focus on kind of B2B stuff, usually a sales guy will go in there, give them the demo. It'll be the best thing ever. They'll love it. He'll find himself in the car an hour later, saying to himself, "What the hell just happened?" There's no clear next step. They're in the car with nothing, and they
Right.
drive back to the office, and the manager will say, "Well, John, how did the meeting go?" And what will John say?
Fantastic. They love us.
Yeah, they
They
love
got
us.
it.
Yeah, and they did love what John showed.
Yeah.
They told him, "We love it. It's amazing. We're gonna go and form a committee now. We're going to see how we're going to integrate this. You know what? Can you come back in 2 weeks and give us another demo? We want to bring in more people."
Yeah.
And then what we find is they're kind of I call them happy ears. We call them happy ears, and really kind of tuning into the stuff that we want to listen to, and kind of filtering out all the difficult, real selling stuff. At the end of the day, are left with nothing but hope, or hopium.
Right. And people, in my book, I call it the chain link effect. And I was working at a company called Chain Link Technologies. And the VP told me, goes, "Brian, you got to be concerned about this. The first demo is going to go amazing. The problem is nothing happens after that." Well, they have to test it. They have to get it approved. They have to get management buy-in, and they have to justify all these things that have to happen, but they don't know how to do it.
Hmm.
Right.
Process.
You know, I equate it to what all of us do. I mean, do you know how to buy a house? If you haven't bought one in 5 years, you probably forgot how it works. You think you
Mm.
just get on Zillow and you go, that looks pretty. Can I afford
Yeah,
it? I have to sell my current house. Do I really want that school zone? There's a lot of issues that people aren't thinking through.
sure.
And what's the default? I'll stay in my house.
Yeah, people are terrified of change. There's an interesting concept I use. I talk a lot about, I don't know if you've ever heard of, do you know what VUCA is? It's a VUCA world, VUCA. VUCA is an acronym. It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It was basically initiated by the American Military Academy in the early 90s when world order changed, and they couldn't make sense of what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
And so they came up with this acronym, and the business world then took this on. And if you think about it, it is a VUCA world we live in, and our prospects and clients, they can't bear complexity and ambiguity. And when we go in there and we're showing them all this stuff and we're selling to logic, it doesn't make sense to them on an emotional level. Why do I want to buy a house next to a school?
Right.
Why do I want to? Yeah. And that's the stuff that we don't really focus on. It's really penetrating down deep and going deep and understanding what the emotional triggers are. And I
Now, was
think
that one
that
of
is,
your epiphanies? I'm sure you learned it in the diamond business because that's a very
well,
emotional
you
sale.
know what? Yeah, I'm going to be honest and tell you, I think in those days in the diamond, that was more of a commodity sale.
Was it?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was. Because back in those days, I mean, there wasn't any base pricing. I mean, there was pricing started to structure and everyone knew what things were worth. But it's actually when I went into tech that I realized
Yeah.
that it's not, if someone says to you, I need to buy a SaaS solution to manage my accounting, the sales guy will usually dive in there and show them everything, teach him everything he needs to know about this SaaS application without asking him one question: why?
Why? Yeah.
And that is really where it starts: understanding the prospects, understanding what their problems are, helping them realize for themselves sometimes that they have a bigger problem they even realize. They'll say, I needed an accounting system, but then after a half an hour and 1 hour conversation, figure out that they actually have, it's costing them money not working with a SaaS application, for example. It's causing them, it's aggravation.
Yeah.
They won't tell you that. They won't walk in and say, listen, buddy, I need a system right now because I ain't sleeping at night. This is costing me time and I'm afraid of getting audited and I don't know what to do. And so what we'll find is usually the salesperson is so emotionally engaged themselves that they just sell to logic and hope for the best. And that doesn't work.
And was it selling an accounting system that epiphany went off?
I think it's really when I was, so I was actually selling financial services software, and in that world, yeah, I had a lot of inbound business coming in, a lot of inbound leads, and everyone needed whatever they needed, and it took me a while. Suddenly, I started asking them, well, why do you need this? And suddenly, we're starting to have a really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Half an hour later, these people are telling me their biggest secrets.
Right.
Go
And what's
figure.
really behind it? Because
Exactly.
instead of what it does, it's what happens to me if I don't have it.
Exactly.
In the
And
accounting thing, it's an audit and financial service, fear of missing out,
that's
or
terrifying.
yeah.
That's terrifying. And I think that is really where real sales is today, especially with the abundance of sales efforts out there. Everyone is getting 100 calls a day. If I take cold calls, for example, everyone's pretty much saying the same kind of thing. What's the pattern interrupt here? How are we being different? And how are we making our prospects actually lower their guard and actually open up, listen to us, and give us valuable information that will help us help them? And
So
that is,
what did you do? Did you profile like their emotions? What's the real
so
driver?
that's a good point. And I think really only during the last few years of my career was I able to really uncover the power of selling to emotion and then only justifying it by logic. People buy emotionally and then justify their decisions intellectually. And that's clearly from, from educating myself and, the type of work I do now. And that is where we focus. It's all the neuroscience of the brain. The emotion is by far more stronger than the logic. And if we're able to maintain our emotional composure, it's easier for us to sell. Because let me ask you this. When two people, let's say there's a couple, one loves the other more, who controls the relationship? The one that loves less.
Yeah,
fair?
right.
It's the same with a sales process. If you have a buyer that couldn't care less because he's being sold to logic, who's more emotionally engaged? The seller. And so the seller will just push and push and push because he's emotionally engaged and he needs to get the deal. The buyer doesn't really care because there's just a huge amount of opportunity out there. He knows that is he getting help? Not really. On the other hand, if the seller is able to maintain his emotional composure, work out of his logic, and engage the emotion of the buyer, guess who's in control?
Now, if you were to ask 100 reps if they know that people buy emotionally, probably 99 would say yes, but probably 2% apply it.
Exactly.
Right, because it requires you to have an outward mindset to think about the current emotional state and then build it into awareness of the problem, curiosity about solving it, and an interest to take action.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, I'm a huge believer of the belief wheel. I'll always ask this. I talk to so many salespeople and I ask them, one of my first questions is, what's more important? Your belief that you'll be successful on a cold call, or your action of actually dialing the number? Your belief that you'll be able to close a sale, or your action of actually asking for the decision? And pretty much 90% of the time, everyone says it's belief. But clearly it's action, so action drives belief. And to your point, what I find is the biggest challenge of salespeople today is lack of preparation.
Right, because it does require preparation to think the way someone else would, and to come up with questions to get them focused on the emotion that you want to elicit.
Spot on. And it takes preparation so that you don't become emotionally engaged. And so I think that one of the biggest sins today that salespeople are involved in is that they don't prepare and they don't debrief. What they need to be doing is they need to prepare before their call. They need to, again, if it's a cold call, it's a cold call. But if they're going to a sales interview, they're going to a sales call, they need to prepare before. Professional salespeople prepare 3 hours for every hour that they actually perform in sales meetings. Think about that for a second.
Yeah, and that's it. I always found it weird that somebody would spend probably 15 hours to get the meeting and 5 minutes to prepare for it.
Or not even, yeah. And that would be just going over someone's LinkedIn profile, right, and just writing down a few notes. So prep is so important because prep helps us disengage our emotion, engage our own logic, so that we'll ask the right questions. We'll be prepared for the questions that we will be asking. And here's the interesting thing. We're in the age of AI, and we're measuring everything and we're monitoring everything. If you check most salespeople out there, their talk ratio is something like 70-30, the wrong way around.
Right.
And why is that?
Yeah, and then the questions are just canned questions. Does it make sense? What would you like to do next? As opposed, that's not getting to an emotion.
No, right. And it's super interesting because you'll have salespeople, like I'd say average salespeople, that ask questions to gather information. Yes. You'll have some other type of salespeople that'll ask questions to understand their prospects and clients. The professional salespeople ask questions to help their prospects realize for themselves and come to their own understanding. And that's the powerful thing. And I think there's one element here that this is really something that I've noticed the older I get. There's one little thing called ego. and an
Little thing.
ego is, yeah, I mean, we're salespeople. We go in there, we want to show them what we've got. We want to show them we're the smartest people in the room. We want to show them our great toy. We want to show them we're going to save their world. Now, that's a little bit intimidating if you think about it.
Well,
We,
for the other person, it's
for the
intimidating.
prospect, oh yeah.
Right, because they're hearing all this new stuff that's not connected to their world.
Exactly.
We got to get into
Exactly.
their world, not pull them into ours or push them into ours.
Absolutely. And that really goes back to stuff like being vulnerable. You know, being honest, disarmingly honest. If we go into a sales call and if there's anyone out here that wants to use this, let me know if this ever works for you. Say to your prospect, because this is the truth. Mr. Prospect, I'm not 100% sure I can help you. We might not be a good fit. Would you mind if I ask you a few questions? See if it makes any sense for us to continue the conversation.
Yeah.
That takes a little bit of practice, but I can assure anyone out there that if they try that, it changes the entire flow of a
Right.
conversation.
You're letting them off the hook because their pre-frame that they're going in is this person's going to push me. I don't know if I want this. I don't know if I'm even interested. And they're probably thinking 3-6 months ahead. You're thinking 3 hours ahead. You want 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And you let them have psychological air to express where they're coming from.
Absolutely. And that's really bonding and building rapport with them. It's really making them feel comfortable. And that's where people feel, I mean, I'm sure all the best sales we've ever made, they're all those special sales. They either came from someone who we thought would never buy from us, right?
Yeah.
Or someone who we've been able to bond and we became very close with. They felt very comfortable with us. Those are those easy, good sales. No one felt any pressure. Now,
Right.
when a salesperson is emotionally engaged, then there's a lot of pressure. They're thinking about rent. They're thinking about quota. They might be
Right.
thinking about alimony. They might be thinking about, all this other stuff. And
Right.
so,
They're thinking between like two spectrums. One, is this a qualified deal that I can put forecast and quote and close and tell my manager about? Or I don't want to make friends. I'm not out here to make friends. Well, they either have to talk to you or want to talk to you. Which would you rather?
yeah, yeah. And I think really we have such a powerful role, salespeople. We help people. We solve their problems. We're doctors. We're experts at what we do. And I think that one of the main issues is that we don't get recognized as those. We don't position ourselves with equal business stature. There's more of a subservient kind of approach. And that's something that I believe is not necessary, is wrong. And whenever I build a relationship with my prospects and make sure that we see eye to eye, and there's no difference. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, it does. And what were some of the other epiphanies once you started to understand the emotion, get the people talking?
Yeah.
What happened next?
So I think really asking them good questions,
Yeah.
tough questions, but most importantly, asking their permission at the beginning to be able to ask those questions and setting agendas, maintaining clear next steps, making sure that everything we do, we will actually know what the outcome will be.
Right.
So there's no wishy-washiness, as we like to call it. There's no, I want to think it over. Okay, well, if someone wants to think it over, so if a sales guy gets to think it over, guess who's thinking it over?
Yeah.
And so always make sure we walk out of there with a clear next step. And I think that is probably one of the most important lessons I've learned in sales, is really to set your stage, set your agenda, have mutual business stature, and make sure that whenever we walk out of any sales encounter, we always know what is supposed to happen next.
Right.
That's the key.
It is, because otherwise it was just a good conversation.
Yeah, and otherwise you have a full funnel full of stuff that just doesn't have any
any
future.
real tangibility to it.
Yeah, and you know, and I think this is this really brings us to um, managers focusing on the wrong side of the problem.
Let's talk
So
about
they're like,
that.
why? Yeah, why are we not? Why are you not closing deals? And we're talking about Mr. Sales Guy. You know, we've all been there. This is, you know, I'm not. There's nothing special about me. This is everything I've taught. Every bad example I've given right now, I have learned. I have all the scar tissue that you can imagine. Anything that anyone could have ever done to a sales guy, I've been through it. But that scar tissue helped me actually grow to what I am today. But here's the thing. We end up with a funnel of maybe not qualified, not closable, but very sexy opportunities. And they're all in there.
Yeah.
And everyone's scratching their heads. And Mr. Manager comes over and says, well, you know, John, what's going on with all these opportunities? You got a few million in there in opportunities. What's happening? Why are they not closing? And Mr. John, you know, John Sales Guy's running through town, professional visitor, really busy, but he's not closing much business. And it's frustrating for John, and it's frustrating for the manager. But here's the biggest sin in sales from my point of view at this point. You see, John's manager that we've just described, he used to be a really, really good sales guy.
Yeah.
And guess what happened? He was so good that his managers, the business leader of the company, said to him, listen, I'm going to promote you. Now, their sales guy was now promoted into a manager, and then he was actually cheated into turning into the worst manager they've ever had.
Right. And we all then look at it from the dashboard perspective. And I think this is kind of, in a lot of ways, ruined sales, because when you had to talk with somebody, you got into their head, the rep, and the rep would work on the most likely deals. But now we've got to work on all these deals. And now that people are looking at win rate, well, what does that mean? If you focus on less deals, your win rate goes down, but your revenue goes up. Is that bad? I don't think so. And I think the KPI thing and the over focus on CRM versus interaction with clients and really moving a sale to a next step, you know, versus the next stage, you know, demo, present, propose, negotiate, close. Well, there's a lot of stuff that goes in between those buckets.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of time. There's a lot of errors.
Well, if you're taking this from an enablement point of view, and I appreciate that, actually, it's amazing. Yeah, everyone's on their CRM, really, and the CRM, that's a rearview mirror kind of thing. Where's the playbook? Where's their cookbook? Where's their behavioral plan?
Right.
So if everyone does what they need to do within their behavioral plan, their cookbook, they will reach their goals. The only thing is that no one's really, if they might throw some of these things out, but no one's really enforcing it. There's no accountability. There's no playbook. So no one, yeah, you know, the playbook isn't updated. Maybe there was a playbook from maybe a decade ago. And so I think one of the main issues that we might be looking at is an accountability issue, maintaining accountability, and it all starts from the top. I don't know if you've some of the listeners out there and the viewers, they go into a sales meeting. What does that sales meeting look like? Do they walk out of that sales meeting all powered up and ready to eat the world, or do they walk out of there frustrated,
right,
drained? So from their point of view, whenever they do go in there, they need to think, what are the best things I can take out of the sales meeting? How can I first learn from my peers and help my peers grow as well? Instead of being kind of, you know, maintaining more of a competition edge, being more complementary to their peers so that everyone can grow together and learn from each other. Yeah. So I think that's another element, kind of just wrapping this up by putting a nice red bow on this. It's really about teamwork. It's about learning from each other. It's about the individual as well, but it also needs to start with management and sales leadership, because that is where the key, that's where it starts.
Right, because if the manager, like the comp plan is the compass, but also what the manager values is the compass.
Absolutely. You know, I'll meet some managers, I'll ask them, all right, what do your KPIs look like? Yeah. What is your vision for the next, and they'll scratch their heads. They'll say, well, you want to achieve this, that, and the other. That's fair. Well, how does that translate to the sales guys? and have the sales professionals in your company translate that to their personal goals. We all do stuff for ourselves, and that's fair. And if we're going back to the salespeople, you know, this is the most rewarding job you can ever have. It has the worst reputation, but it is the best. You make great money, you do what you want, you get to meet people, you solve problems, and you can live a well-balanced life. And so from my point of view is, as long as you maintain emotional composure, you're grounding yourself, and you know exactly the tasks that you need to do on a behavioral level, you'll be very successful.
And one last question. What do you believe about sales that probably 90% of salespeople don't either know or believe?
What they don't know or believe?
Yeah.
Wow. So I heard this. This is really interesting. The three biggest lies in sales is, one, the customer is always right. Okay. He who has the dollar controls the outcome, and the customer is king. So the customer can't be right, because if he's right, he wouldn't need your help.
Yeah.
That's number one. We have the merchandise. We have the value that they need, and if they're king, well, you know, maybe they can go and buy from our competitors, but we can also sell to their competitors, if you think about it. So I think it's mutual business stature. We deserve mutual business stature. We are trusted advisors. If we position ourselves as vendors, we'll continue to be perceived as vendors, and we'll act like vendors. It's just a cycle.
Right.
But if we start if we reckon the respect, and every salesperson out there is a gem in himself. He solves problems. We're like doctors, and doctors prep, and doctors learn, and doctors train, and doctors listen and ask questions. So why don't we?
Cool. Hey, it's been a great conversation. Where can people go to connect with you?
Great. So they can look me up on LinkedIn, James Abraham, Standard Training in Israel. They can email me, james.abraham@standard.com, or check out my website, israel.standard.com, and looking forward to connecting.